Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about analysts possibly being gone in college football and some of the different things that are going on to make the pocketbooks work for some athletic departments out there, because there are going to be some things they have to pay for that they might not be prepared to pay for right about now. But let's get into some national championship betting trends, and there's a lot of stuff happening. There were definitely some movement in odds. There's some big movement in odds, frankly, with some different teams, and I want to break down. Let's start with the big-time players out there, the guys that are kind of leading the pack here, and it's Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas. Those are the people that have the best odds to win the national title. They have the most amount of bets. They have the most amount of money on them to win the national title. So Georgia leads the way in terms of favorites to win it at plus 325, and Ohio State is right behind them at plus 375. So as you can see, these two are kind of on their own turf right now. They are kind of playing their own game. And there's a lot of people that are noticing that, and they're paying a lot of money to bet on them. And the interesting thing here is Georgia, while they are the favorite, they are not the number one total amount of bets or the number one total amount of money spent. Ohio State absolutely dominates both those categories, and I think it's kind of for good reason. There's been a lot of hype around Ohio State this offseason, and I think when you look at what they've done this offseason, it's kind of hard to argue with. They are a national championship team. They are one that can absolutely get there, and then it's kind of a toss-up. I think when you look at Georgia and Ohio State, to me, they're 1-2, and there's a little bit of a gap. And then you have Texas and Oregon, and then there's a little bit of a gap, and then you have probably about 15 to 20 teams that are roughly around the same level and definitely could be fighting for this thing. But Ohio State and Georgia is where it starts, and Ohio State is obviously going to get a lot of love in this kind of new world, and it definitely going to get a lot of love because of what they did in the transfer portal and what they've done in NIL the last 6 months to a year, and a lot of the different things happening in Columbus have a lot of people excited, obviously. So it's obviously a huge portion to have 35.2% of the entire money bet on national championships or national champions to go to Ohio State, but if you look at the offseason that they've had, it's kind of hard to argue with. Georgia takes it over 50%, so that's just a lot of the money. The majority of the money is going towards those two teams. But that doesn't mean it's not being spread out a little bit. Texas getting 8% of the money bet, 8% of the total bets as well, is definitely, indicative of where they're at. There are a lot of people that are starting to buy into what Texas is selling, but I promise you, if they do something special this year, in 2025, that number will be absolutely through the roof. It'll be right where Ohio State is, I would bet you. So it'll be incredible to watch this unfold. But let's look at the rest of the teams on here and see if you can pick out the team that I don't necessarily think belongs. But let's start with Oregon. They are the team that is absolutely kind of right after that. As we talked about, it's Texas, Oregon are the teams that I'm watching very, very closely, and they have about 4% of the bets right now. So definitely very interesting. They're at about 1,000 odds, definitely not too long by any means. Their odds have actually grown a little bit since they opened at 900, so some people aren't necessarily as confident in Oregon as some people might think out there. Alabama's odds have jumped a ton. They were at plus 600 to start this. Now they're at plus 1,400. So a lot of people are doubting Bama going into this year. Let's put it that way. But there are some other teams that jumped a little bit. LSU jumped a little bit up. Mississippi the exact same. So I think people are just leaning into Georgia is the team in the SEC. Let's not overthink this. Let's just go with the team that we understand and that we know and move forward from there. So maybe that's where some of this is coming into play. Michigan's right there. They're definitely a team that has dropped a ton. They were plus 800 to start this. They're plus 2,000 now. So I don't know if it's some people just, preying on their downfall. I don't know if it's some people seeing all of the changes that are going on and aren't quite as confident. But I'll just say, I wouldn't necessarily write off Michigan. I understand that, they're losing a lot of people, and there's a lot of questions going into this season with Alex Orji and how he's going to take over that quarterback position and everything in between, but the team is really solid. The defensive line is going to be absolutely dominant. The defense in general is going to be one of the top in the country, and that run game is going to be mean. There's no two ways about that. Sharon Moore knows how to open some people up and definitely give them a chance to succeed, and with someone like Alex Orji at quarterback, it makes it so much easier. You have so many openings for that guy to make big-time plays for you with his legs that it's going to be really hard for teams to defend this entirely. So while I'm not necessarily betting on Michigan to win the national title, I'm a little bit surprised it's jumped that much. But some teams that have actually got their odds to move in the right direction, we have UGA, obviously, Ohio State have gotten a ton of bets, so they're going to move up. Texas has moved up a little bit as well. Notre Dame, Tennessee, and Missouri have also moved up in terms of odds. So a lot of hype behind those teams. Obviously, Nico Iamaleava over at Tennessee is one of the most hyped up players going into this season, and I absolutely love him. I think he's one of the most remarkable players. I think his arm talent is right in between what Joe Milton had and what Hendon Hooker had, and I think Tennessee fans are absolutely going to love this kid. So maybe it does feel like 1998 this time around, and they have a chance to win a national title. Missouri making a ton of strides now, don't have nearly as many bets as everyone else does with 1.6 compared to Tennessee with 4% of the bets. But the reality is not too many people are going to put money on Missouri. That's just kind of the way of things. Now, if they follow up last season with another really good season, then you'll see that number start to climb pretty significantly going forward. But as of right now, it feels like Missouri has a ton of hurdles ahead of them in the SEC to even get to the playoff, and then there's a lot of stuff that has to go right. So I don't necessarily hate that one, but there are a couple in here that I think are going to be a little bit interesting to watch. You know, Florida State still sitting pretty high on this list, the number one team in the ACC. I think that makes sense, frankly. When you look at last year and you say, Mike Norvell is fully ready to get this team not only in the national conversation for 1 year, but for many years to come. I think you can feel pretty confident that Florida State is at least going to be in that conversation. I've said a couple of times on here, I'm not quite as confident as some other people are in Florida State or in Clemson, who's absolutely on this list as well. But I understand where people are coming from, and I understand they're going to get a ton of bets because Mike Norvell has proven that even with a lot of transfers coming in, even with a lot of craziness around the program, he can get a winning product. There's no two ways about that. So it'll be really fascinating to watch that unfold. The team that I really want to get into, and the team that absolutely, it's crazy that they're even among these other teams, is Colorado. They are 12,000 plus 12,500 to win a national title. They also have about 4% of the bets. That doesn't make sense. Let's just be totally honest with each other. Whoever bet that money, the 4.5% of people that decided it was a good idea to bet Colorado to win a national title, light the money on fire. No disrespect to Colorado. I think they're doing an incredible job. I think Dion is absolutely building something out there that can be a really good product in a couple of years. As I look at their roster right now, they have about 20 to 22 really good players. And then the depth and everything that you need to win a national title isn't there. So while I think they upgraded on the offensive line, while I think Shedeur Sanders is going to have a better season than he had a year ago, while I think the wide receiver group is a good group, and they have the ability to make some noise in the Big 12, this is not a national championship team. If they are, then I will hang them up. I'll be totally honest with you. It will be the greatest coaching job that we have ever seen. It would be Deion Sanders being a Hall of Famer right off there. You could put him in just based off that if he was able to pull off a national title this upcoming season. So whoever made that bet, more power to you. I respect the confidence, but it's a really bad bet. Let's just put it that way. I don't necessarily think this team is going to win the Big 12, although that definitely has somewhat of a shot as opposed to this, which has very little shot. But I think Colorado is going to be a fun team to watch, and I think they're going to be much better than they were a year ago, but them being much better than they were a year ago and being a national title contender are two wildly different things. And I think as of right now, when I look at their schedule and I look at their team, they're a 7 and maybe 8 win team. And that's a good thing. They were 4-8 last year. They were 1-11 the year before. So the rebuild will still be going great. But the way that Colorado has set up this season is essentially just setting themselves up for failure. Because if you don't win the Big 12, people are going to say, well, you promised a Big 12 championship. If you don't go to the playoff, people are going to say you promised a playoff berth. All of these things can't be promised when you're coming off a 4-8 season. So I fully understand the confidence around them. I fully understand Dion has that swagger about him that people are really gravitated towards, and frankly, I gravitate towards it as well. But the reality is this team is just not able to compete with the Oregons or the Alabamas. I mean, we saw they couldn't compete with the Oregons of the world last year. So it's no disrespect to what Deion is doing. He's doing just incredible, incredible things in Boulder right now. But he has so many steps to go to get to a national title contender and to especially win that national title. So while I really respect the confidence of some of these people and I really respect that they're, you know, putting their money where their mouth is in a lot of ways, I just think it's a terrible bet. But that's beside the point. One of the teams that I am watching very, very closely in this is Alabama. I'll be totally honest. I understand there was a lot of people that want Alabama to not succeed, that want them to fail and fall on their face and the era of Alabama dominance to be over. This is still a really good team. And if Jalen Milroe takes that step forward that you need him to, it gets a little bit interesting down there in Tuscaloosa. And I think Jalen Milroe is one of those guys that I think a lot of people around the country are just assuming he's not going to be that fantastic of a passer this upcoming year. But strides can be taken, and especially when Kalen DeBoer is the one coaching you, they can really be taken. And then Notre Dame is another team that I'm watching because I think they've done a lot of really, really good stuff this offseason, particularly bringing in Chris Mitchell at wide receiver. I think is absolutely huge. This defense is going to be absolutely dominant, led by Xavier Watts and Riley Mills and Howard Cross and all of the incredible players that they have. So those are the two teams I'm watching if you want to get a little bit crazy with it, but don't get Colorado crazy with it. No disrespect to the Buffaloes, but if they win the national title, then I'll come on here and do a full hour apology to Colorado football and to Deion, and I'll try to make it right, but I just don't see that happening. Let's just put it that way. But we'll take our third break here, and when we come back, we're going to break down the playoff schedule. It officially came out with all of the TV slots, where they're going to be played, on what channel, and everything in between. So we're going to break down all of that and kind of what we can look forward to for these games right after this. So stick with us.